Welcome to the Know. I'm Ashley.
I'm Ben.
Strap in, folks. It's time for a talk about free speech. Earlier this week, gaming jet heavyweight Discord shut down a public server for altright.com, a political group that was used for organizing protests in Charlottesville this last weekend, and a number of other tech giants have also ejected the fringe political group from their services.
Between Discord, Google, Reddit, GoDaddy, and others serving up some high-profile bans, the affected groups, or those wearing their next, are decrying the bans as the end of free speech online as we know it, and the politicization of corporations.
Yeah, well, there's a little bit more nuance to free speech and what's happening with these bans, though. What is undeniable is that there has been a noteworthy change in the way online discussions are being policed by the tech industry. For a lot of years, a lot of these big companies have been more or less hands-off, except in the most extreme instances, while still allowing certain types of language and communities to form on their platform. But there's been a shift.
And it's not just this week. We've seen YouTube tightening down on all kinds of content that they allow on their platforms and what they allow to be monetized. And that's been going on for months.
I keep getting emails that some of our videos are being demonetized. They're all from like 3 years ago, but there's one of like, Mormons and the war against porn. And they're like, yeah, you can't talk about that. So yeah, that has been happening with YouTube a lot.
Now more of these online platforms are taking a harder stance, which is going to bring a few free speech discussions, particularly among those who are being banned, and in some cases, concerns about discrimination over personal beliefs. Because people in general are pretty jumpy about slippery slopes.
Also about being banned. No one wants to be banned. Now before we get too far into what's actually going on, it is worth mentioning the events from Charlottesville this past weekend. Not the focus of this story. We're not a world news channel, but we can't talk about the recent bans without at least that much context.
By now, you're more than likely aware of the controversial and violent protests that took place in Charlottesville by white supremacists and neo-Nazis, one of whom drove a car into a crowd of counter-protesters and killed a young woman. And what we're seeing now is a series of consequences to those events play out in the online space, thanks to a number of moves made by popular web services, including Discord.
Yeah, so as for the Discord thing, the popular gaming chat app made an announcement this week via Twitter informing users that it would be shutting down the altright.com server and other users involved with what went down in Charlottesville. They wrote, "Discord's mission is to bring people together around gaming. We're about positivity and inclusivity, not hate, not violence."
They went on to say, "Today we've shut down the altright.com server and a number of other accounts associated with the events in Charlottesville. We will continue to take action against white supremacy, Nazi ideology, and all forms of hate."
Now, before anyone could accuse them of political bias, Discord's defense of the shutdown specifically actually has to do with terms of service violations. They're claiming that the accounts and servers shut down were specifically promoting or enabling the coordination of violence around Charlottesville by several, quote, bad actors.
And on top of that, they don't want some of those viewpoints on their service at all. Discord CMO Ernst said, "We unequivocally condemn white supremacy, neo-Nazism, and any other group term, ideology that is based on these beliefs. They are not welcome on Discord. While we don't read people's private servers, our terms of service explicitly forbid harassment, threatening messages, or calls to violence. When hatred like this violates our community standards, we act swiftly to take servers down and ban individual users."
Now, several community members have since asked for the ban and removal of counter-protesters who were also using Discord to coordinate. Discord said if they have specific complaints about abuse, users can send an email to abuse@discordapp.com and they would be happy to investigate it, just as they did the accounts they've already banned. No word yet, though, on any actions actually taken on that front, though.
Naturally, this whole thing is kicking off a big discussion about what else? Free speech.
Free speech!
So we probably should talk a little bit about what it does and doesn't protect.
Yeah, because there's a lot of misunderstandings. Actually, contrary to popular belief, free speech does include all kinds of speech, even hate speech, weirdly enough. It was reaffirmed rather recently, actually, just back in June when the Supreme Court reached a unanimous ruling about the matter in Mattel versus Tam. So that case was about a band wanting to name itself after a term that could be considered racially offensive, and the government not allowing specific trademark protections for the band name because of it. The court ended up agreeing with the band that, yes, they can be named what they want. No one has to like it, no one has to agree with it, no one has to think it's tasteful, but legally they're allowed to name their thing that.
Free speech protects citizens from reprisal by the government for dissenting opinions. What isn't protected by the First Amendment is your ability to violate a private company's terms of service agreement, by which they can technically end their contract with you for virtually any reason they feel like.
Or no reason.
Yeah, it's a loophole they can use to terminate services for any user they don't want on the platform if those users violate certain clauses in the terms of service.
Yeah, and this comes up less frequently in tech, but we have actually seen some weird versions of this play out in the real world. Not the same thing at all as people being banned for hate speech online, by the way, or white supremacy or anything like that, but at least in the vein of consequences over personal beliefs, we did see some weird stuff with businesses. They were hit for refusing to render services like baking cakes. Oddly enough, bakeries were a big one for same-sex couples in recent years. In one of those cases, the court did actually order that it was discrimination and the bakery had to pay damages because laws in the state specifically prohibit companies from discriminating their services based on sexual orientation.
However, bakeries don't exactly have a terms of service you have to sign before you walk in the door.
Not usually.
And that's where these online companies are a little bit better protected in their actions. They can point to specific violations to justify the shutdowns, and those terms can be pretty broad, like Discord's, which state the company may also terminate or suspend your access to any communication channels at any time without notice for any reason.
Broad. Plus, the bakery instances were also a little bit different. They were about discrimination rather than free speech. They were refusing service because of someone's identity, like who they are, rather than what they believe. So, not apples to apples. Now, if someone had something discriminatory about beliefs or opinions in their terms of service in the first place, that might be a little bit different story. And if they have something in there that's about who you are, something that you can't change, that's more difficult to enforce legally.
Yeah, just a little bit.
A little bit.
If anybody is unhappy with the way all this is set up, they are free to take it to court. So far, we don't have many instances of people taking a company to court over their terms of service, but it did happen once a few years back. There was a Schnabel versus Trilegent Corp, which was a...
Those sound like pretend TV names.
I feel like
just
they would
by
be
the way.
Evil corporation trying to take over something.
They do.
Which was a class action lawsuit brought against a program that offered discounts on products. The plaintiff wanted a full refund after several months, but Trilegent Corp wouldn't grant it because it was explicitly stated in their terms of service.
In that instance, the Second Circuit ruled against the company, mostly because their terms of service weren't conspicuous. They were in like a little tiny font at the bottom of their site and then in a follow-up email that wasn't specifically signed. So, another case, again, not apples to apples.
But since most people don't have the money to start a long, protracted legal battle with services like Discord, the other option is to find another service. And that's about all there is to it, because free speech is not about your ability to say whatever you want online so much as it is about your ability to say what you want and not get thrown in jail for it.
And even then, not completely. Fighting words, calls to violence, also not allowed, which brings this whole issue back to square one anyway. So, no, technically Discord isn't violating free speech by exercising bans for users who are making calls to violence.
And it's not just Discord getting in on it either. They've been just the most visible for those of us in the gaming sphere. GoDaddy removed white supremacist site The Daily Stormer from its domain hosting this week, while Google delisted it from their domain registry, also for violating the terms of service.
Oddly enough, that website has ended up in Russia.
Oh, interesting. Airbnb has been banning accounts for the same reason, and both Facebook and Reddit have also started shutting down numerous groups for hate speech in the last few days as well.
And with all the shutdowns happening for all these various groups, it seems like maybe we're coming to a fork in the road for online discussion after several years of growing contention. In the past, sites like Twitter and Reddit in particular have been pretty keen on allowing online discussions to continue unregulated more or less, but the events of Charlottesville and the growing threat of actual violence are definitely changing the positions of the tech industry's heavy hitters. Also, because in this case, the companies really understandably don't want to be associated with white supremacy in any way and are motivated to take a very strong stance against it.
Because of all that, there are some who are worried that they could one day be kicked off their social media platforms over personal beliefs. To quick clarification, we're not talking about people who are in agreement with white supremacists. We're talking about others who, while not sharing those extremist views, do hold what they consider to be controversial opinions across all ends of the political spectrum, or opinions that go against the grain. And these shutdowns have some of those people concerned about the idea of who decides what hate speech is and what if I'm on the receiving end of it next.
Yeah, so that's typically a worry for people who don't always see eye to eye with the rest of their online peers. But really, the key takeaway here is probably that the right to freedom of speech isn't the same as freedom from consequences. Your beliefs may not get you arrested, but when you sign into a privately operated platform, you are also agreeing to abide by their terms, and those may actually be worth reading. Once you sign in, free speech doesn't apply.
So by all means, continue posting your memes and arguing about whose fault it is that you just got wasted in PUBG. And yes, even expressing your controversial opinions like that Sonic the Hedgehog was never that good of a video game.
Fighting words, but legal.
Miles will kill me. But leave the inciting violence and racism at the door, okay? Rule of thumb, be excellent to each other.
Bill and Ted have a lot to teach us. What do you guys think of all these recent bans happening online from Discord and all these other services? Let us know in the comments.
For future updates on further discussions about free speech, remember to like this video, and if you're new around here, subscribe to the Know. I feel like I just read the Declaration of Independence with all that jargon.
We get wordy sometimes. Legal stuff.
I'm gonna just go and untie my tongue.